Rod. I'm a local attorney, and I represent some people that have been arrested recently at Fresh Brewed Coffee. And I'm here to kind of shed some light. I've got all these cameras on me right now, I can hardly even see. It's interesting that 25 years ago, I was in this building as a board of director for Street Reach Mission. This building's been part of my life for many, many years, and it's so strange that 25 years later, I'm here to discuss the same problem I discussed 25 years ago. Back then, I was a public defender, and Miss Libby Carter ran the Street Reach, and I'd come every night at 6:15, and they checked the people in, and they had a women's room upstairs too, and you'd have the Baptist ministers down here yelling about the devil of alcohol, and they'd have the meetings, and it was sad what the city had to endure, or the people that lived here, because there was no support for them. There was absolutely nothing. And in the 25 years since then, I'm back here in the same building talking about the same thing. And it's just interesting that we go that route. I took a couple verses from the Bible, and I'm not the most religious guy in the world, but I'm going to share one or two of them as I go through this. And I just asked to do the press conference yesterday. I usually don't do press conferences. I represent people in court usually. Proverbs 19:17 says, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. And I want to just start by saying Miss Kate that runs this place, she runs Fresh Brewed Coffee. I've been here many times now. She runs a good coffee business. People come in, they get coffee. People that work behind the counter, you got Miss Erin, she's from Tennessee. I said, it sounds like you're from West Virginia, but she said that's where my family's from, and the accent, but she's in a wheelchair. She volunteers her time, and she's making all the espressos and coffees, and she can't reach for this, and she can't reach for that, and she got the biggest smile in the world. And back there with her is Daniel, excuse me, and Daniel, he's volunteering, he's making the coffee, and this is just such a beautiful place that, you know, if I go to heaven someday, I want to go with her, because she's going to get to heaven. Miss Kate's going to get to heaven. Absolutely. Because you have to realize that treating vulnerable people with generosity is viewed as a direct investment with God. Now that's something that this city doesn't know. You know, let's start with the, I think we own a convention center. The city owns a convention center. I think the city owns a hotel. I think they spent $20 or $30 million on their baseball stadium. They just spent $30 million on a theater that seats 300 people. That's $100,000 a seat. But there's no money to help the people that are homeless.
That's right.
And people can say what they want to say about me, but I'm going to tell you one or two things about me. I left home when I was 15. I ran away because of abuse. I lived on the streets. I was homeless, and I know. And until you lived on the street and you see other people eat and you can't eat, you don't know.
That's right.
And don't tell me on those comments, oh, those people, they ought to get a job, they ought to work. It's their fault. Let me tell you, when you're homeless and it's raining all night long, and you're a woman and your hair gets all wet, and you don't have a mirror, you don't have a brush, you don't have a toothbrush, you don't have anything, it's hard to get a job.
That's right.
Matthew 25:40. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me, and that's God.
That's right.
We have a problem. And I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff, and then Mr. Schaefer might talk about the lawsuits. But we decide to judge people by their covers. We don't know who they are. When you look at me, you don't know I was homeless. I've eaten more Spam than you can understand. I don't want to eat it no more. But I've done a radio show for 10 years here. I do a show on Saturday morning from 6 to 8 in the morning. And you might not have heard it. It's okay. But I end the show every single week with a saying, Lord, please protect, shelter, and nourish the homeless, but for the grace of God, go I. Because I've been there. I've been there. And all we do is we just push it under the rug. For 25 years, we're pushing it under the rug. Myra Starnes owns this building. She owns it. And she allows Miss Kate to have it, the rent's low enough that she can do what she does. Everybody works for free here. They leave the mission at 6 a.m. And today, they leave the mission at 6 a.m. They're waiting for Miss Kate to open. She opens at 8, I think, around there. The cops detained people today for camping. They're not doing it for loitering now, but they're doing it for camping. Because the loitering statute's unconstitutional in my mind, and I'll get to that in a while. You know, I'm so lucky. You know, you wonder what you're supposed to do in life. You know, I can protect these people, the homeless. I was there. You have to protect, you have to shelter, and you have to nourish. We just decide not to do anything. There's a jail in North Carolina. I'm looking into it. They get the homeless. They lock them up in North Carolina. And what do you think they do? Do you know? Anybody? No. They buy them, I'm telling you the truth now, they buy them a one-way ticket to Myrtle Beach.
Are you serious?
Yes. They're putting the homeless on buses and sending them here. Now I'm thinking maybe the city manager, Fox Simons, because he's the one that probably orchestrated everybody getting arrested. I'll tell Fox how to get rid of the homeless. Why, instead of building movie theaters and ballparks, why don't we just put all the homeless on an airplane? Yeah. And we'll just send them to LaGuardia. We'll send them all away. Or we'll send them to Surfside because they're trying to get rid of the geese. But you know, the city could have bought land on the other side of the tracks. There's buildings out there. We could build places. People are homeless. They come here. For whatever reason they come here, they're here. We're going to just ignore them? You want to run them over like the geese in Surfside because they don't look good enough for you? Because they're sitting next to the city hall? I thought about it. You know, if Jesus walked through Myrtle Beach today, what would he find? He wouldn't be where would we find him? We wouldn't find him next door at City Hall. Jesus won't be there. I believe we find him here at Fresh Brewed Coffee. Sharing a meal, listening to stories, praying with the broken. Where is our compassion? Myrtle Beach will not be judged by how beautiful its oceanfront looks. Myrtle Beach will not be judged by how nice the beaches are. It will be judged someday by how it treated its people. The people everyone else wanted to forget. Because remember, the measure of a community is not how it hides its suffering. It's how it faithfully responds to its suffering. And we're not doing it. Come on, Fox Simons. I think the mayor's a nice guy. I don't think he orchestrated what happened. We got a new assistant city manager, what, a day or 2 days ago? A couple days ago, we got a new assistant city manager. All of a sudden, we're swooping down and arresting the people. I want to talk about loitering. He's the brain. Mr. Schaefer's the smart one. I'm going to talk about loitering for a second. City section 1485. This is what it says. Loitering with a harmful purpose or effect. Loitering for purposes of prostitution and loitering for purposes of drug trafficking. What that means is, if I go down on Yopon Drive and I stand around trying to pick up a prostitute, that is loitering for a harmful purpose. And if I go down on Yopon Drive and I try to buy drugs or sell drugs, that's loitering for a harmful purpose. But when the homeless sit on the lawn at City Hall, they're not loitering. They're being. They're there. Where do you want them to go? They're homeless. That pisses me off. The statute says loiter means to idly stand, sit, lie, or remain in essentially any one place or location with a harmful purpose. I think, my own opinion right now, that the loitering statute is unconstitutional. See, we were going to do the conference out in the front street, and Mr. Schaefer reminded me that there's a distinct chance that we could get arrested for loitering. And he didn't want me to get arrested today. And he didn't want the cameras to get arrested and the news people to get arrested. And Miss Kate and Daniel. He didn't want them to get arrested. So he said, you know what? We're going to go indoors. I was ready to go to jail today because I'd be loitering, but not for a harmful purpose. The statute's unconstitutional. Let me tell you something. It gives police discretion. They can decide when they want to arrest somebody. You walk down the street, you're loitering. You're not loitering. You might be walking. You're allowed to be wherever you want to be. I grew up in the city of Philadelphia before I ran away from home. I stood on a street corner. We didn't get arrested for loitering. It has to be a harmful purpose. And if a homeless person has nowhere to go, maybe they're just loitering for sitting under a tree. That is not a crime. We have filed lawsuits today. Mr. Schaefer's going to talk about it. They're sending people here. You know, they built a theater for $30 million. Why didn't the city just put $8 million aside? Get $8 more million. And let's build a campus. Let's figure it out. And let's be on 60 Minutes someday and say Myrtle Beach turned around their homeless problem. They just don't want to do it. The former mayor, the new mayor, the city manager. I think it's so strange that I'm here after 25 years in the same room I was here 25 years ago, watching the same thing happen. You know, I tell people, I read the comments on social media, oh, they ought to just go out and get a job. Look how they look. Well, I'll tell you what, it's pretty hard when you can't afford a haircut, or you don't have a toothbrush, or you don't have anything. You know, you got all these TV cameras, and I would say that there's some people out there watching that are one paycheck away from being homeless. One woman away from the husband dumping her. Where they don't have any child support. Or somebody gets injured in an auto accident, gets some medical bills, and then the landlord kicks them out. Don't judge the book by its cover. Judge me. I was homeless at 15. You know, I came here, went to college when I was 35, and by the grace of God, I was valedictorian at Coastal. But while I was here, the school gave me money, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't tell people this. But I had a daughter at the time. She passed, but the money that they gave me to go to college, I paid my child support. And I ate out of dumpsters. 70th Avenue, there was an A&P. It was the only supermarket in the city that didn't push their stuff from the supermarket to the dumpster. You could go in the dumpster. I had dumpster shoes. One day you ate pizzas. One day you drank milk. It was crazy. And the Dunkin' Donuts at 29th and Kings Highway, at midnight, they put the donuts out for the homeless. And I'd be there. One bag might have jelly, one bag might have cream. You were lucky if you got a Boston cream. And we traded donuts. I've been there. But you don't know it. Please protect, shelter, and nourish the homeless, but for the grace of God, go I. And everybody out there listening, they ought to come down here. They ought to have a cup of coffee, talk to somebody, pray with them. You go to church on Sunday, you know, they say that faith, everyone has, oh, I have faith, I have faith. Well, faith only comes when you have nothing.
That's right.
When you fall back and I got to catch you. The people that come in here have more faith than most people that go to church here. I think I'm done. Can I be done? We filed some lawsuits. What they did is illegal. We're going to fight them. And I hope I can get some money from the city to give to these people so they're not homeless anymore. But I'll tell you what, city, you ought to come down here and you ought to put some money aside and build a campus and figure it out. Because if you could spend $30 million on a theater and come up with $20 million for the baseball stadium, see what happens is the city wants the county to deal with it. They want the county to deal with it. That's what they want. They want the county. They want to say it's not our problem. It is your problem. You take all that tax money, you take all this money, you give the chamber $50 million for advertising. Why don't we give $5 million a year of that for the homeless? Huh. All right. I don't know. I think I'm finished. You know, please protect, shelter, and nourish the homeless, but for the grace of God go I. I say it every day for 10 years. We need to be thankful for what we have. How selfish are we? We go to a supermarket and you walk up an aisle and there's 32,000 boxes of cereal. Oh, which one should I get? I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry. I want to be next to Kate when we go to heaven because they're going to let her in. I'm going to tell them I know her. Mr. Schaefer is one of my